The blood on her hands wasn't supposed to be there. Sarah stared at her trembling fingers, the crimson stain spreading between them like a terrible confession. Behind her, Michael's body lay motionless on the kitchen floor, the knife she'd grabbed in self-defense now the instrument of an unthinkable tragedy. His daughter would be home from school in less than an hour. The little girl who had finally started calling her Mom would walk through that door to find that everything she loved had been destroyed, again. If you're feeling that knot in your stomach already, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of story lovers. Your support means everything, and I promise this journey through love, loss, and redemption will be worth every minute. 3 years earlier, Sarah Winters had been nothing more than the quiet kindergarten teacher who noticed the exhaustion in Michael Bennett's eyes when he dropped off his daughter, Emma, each morning. He always arrived precisely 7 minutes before the bell, Emma's lunchbox decorated with dinosaur stickers clutched in one hand, his travel mug of coffee in the other. The dark circles under his eyes told a story Sarah recognized all too well, the story of someone carrying too much alone. "Mr. Bennett," she'd said one rainy Tuesday morning, after the other parents had dispersed. "I was wondering if I could speak with you about Emma's project." It wasn't entirely a pretense. Emma had been struggling with the family tree assignment, leaving the maternal branches conspicuously blank. But Sarah's interest went beyond professional concern. Something about the gentle way Michael guided his daughter through the classroom door each morning, the careful attention he paid to her stories, had caught Sarah's attention in a way no man had in years. "Is everything okay?" Michael's voice carried the immediate concern of a parent braced for bad news. "Everything's fine," Sarah assured him. "Emma is wonderful. I just thought maybe we could discuss some ways to make the family project more inclusive for different family structures." Relief softened his features. "That would be great, actually. Emma's been asking questions I'm not sure how to answer." They arranged to meet after school that Friday. What was meant to be a 15-minute conference stretched into an hour, then 2. Michael spoke of his late wife, Caroline, who had died of an aggressive cancer when Emma was just 3. Sarah shared her own story of growing up in foster care, of understanding what it meant to have blank spaces on a family tree. "I'm sorry," Michael said suddenly, glancing at his watch. "I've kept you way too long." Sarah smiled. "I'm the one who suggested coffee after the meeting." "Still. You probably have plans for Friday night." "Grading papers and feeding my cat, Fitzgerald. He's not particularly demanding company." The laugh that escaped Michael seemed to surprise him, as though he'd forgotten the sound of his own amusement. "Emma's with my sister tonight. I was going to grab takeout and watch whatever mindless action movie I could find." "That sounds perfect, actually." Michael's eyes met hers, a question forming. "Would you want to join me? For the takeout and mindless entertainment, I mean." Sarah felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in years. "I'd like that very much." Their relationship developed with the cautious pace of two people who understood loss. Michael was careful to keep Emma's feelings central, introducing Sarah gradually as Ms. Winters from school before she ever became Dad's friend Sarah. Emma, with the resilience of childhood, accepted Sarah's presence with increasing enthusiasm, especially when she discovered Sarah could braid hair in ways her father had never mastered. 6 months into their relationship, Sarah moved from her cramped apartment to Michael's modest suburban home. The transition wasn't without challenges. Emma went through a phase of testing boundaries, of midnight tears asking for a mother who couldn't return. Sarah learned to hold the little girl without trying to replace the woman whose photographs still adorned the walls. "I'm not trying to be her mom," Sarah told Michael one night, after a particularly difficult bedtime. "I just want to be someone she can count on." Michael took her hand, his eyes reflecting the same mixture of grief and hope that Sarah often felt. "You already are. For both of us." By the time Emma turned 7, their household had found its rhythm. Sarah continued teaching, now at the local middle school where her passion for literature could flourish with older students. Michael's construction business had expanded, allowing him to take fewer weekend jobs and spend more time with his growing family. Emma thrived, her initial wariness transformed into a deep attachment to the woman who read her stories each night and defended her right to wear mismatched socks. The proposal came on an ordinary Tuesday evening. No fancy restaurant, no elaborate setup, just Michael kneeling beside the couch where Sarah sat grading papers, Emma giggling behind her hands as she watched from the hallway. "I know this isn't perfect," Michael said, opening a small velvet box. "But neither are we, and somehow that's made everything better than I ever thought it could be again." Sarah's tears fell onto the simple diamond ring as she nodded, unable to speak. Emma rushed forward, throwing her arms around them both. "Does this mean I can call you Mom now?" she asked Sarah, her eyes wide with hope. It was the first time the word had been spoken between them, and Sarah felt its weight and wonder. "If you want to, sweetheart. But only if you're ready." Emma nodded solemnly. "I'm ready." The wedding was planned for the following spring, a small ceremony in Michael's sister's backyard, with Emma as the flower girl. Life settled into a contented pattern that Sarah had never dared to imagine for herself. The nightmares that had plagued her since childhood, of abandonment, of never belonging, began to fade. Then came the letter. It arrived on a crisp October morning, the envelope unmarked except for Sarah's name typed neatly on the front. No return address, no postmark, someone had delivered it by hand. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 5 words that turned her blood to ice. "I know what you did." Sarah stared at the message, her hands trembling. The past she'd worked so hard to bury, the secrets she'd kept even from Michael, suddenly threatened to surface. She burned the letter in the kitchen sink, watching the flames consume the paper until nothing remained but ash. But the letters continued to arrive, slipped under the windshield of her car, tucked into her faculty mailbox at school, once even folded inside Emma's lunchbox. Each contained the same 5 words, a relentless reminder that someone knew the truth. "Is everything okay?" Michael asked one night, finding her staring blankly at the dinner she was preparing. "You seem distant lately." Sarah forced a smile. "Just tired. End of semester always gets to me." She couldn't tell him. Couldn't risk destroying the life they'd built together. Michael had chosen her because she represented stability, safety. How could she admit that her entire identity was constructed on carefully crafted lies? The truth was that Sarah Winters hadn't always been Sarah Winters. Before moving to this quiet suburb, before becoming a teacher beloved by students and parents alike, she had been Meredith Calloway, a woman who had fled her hometown after a night of violence that had left one man dead and another imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. It had been self-defense. At least, that's what Sarah told herself during the rare moments she allowed the memories to surface. Her boyfriend, Tyler, had been drinking again, his temper escalating from verbal abuse to something more dangerous. When he'd raised his fist, Sarah had grabbed the nearest object, a heavy glass paperweight, and struck him. The blow had caught him at just the wrong angle, and suddenly Tyler was on the floor, blood pooling beneath his head, his eyes vacant. Panic had overwhelmed her. Instead of calling the police, Sarah had fled. She'd left evidence that implicated Tyler's best friend, a man who had once made unwanted advances toward her. The police had arrested him within days. Sarah had disappeared, assuming a new identity in a town far enough away that no one would connect her to the crime. For 8 years, she'd lived with the knowledge of what she'd done, building a new life brick by careful brick. Now, someone had followed those bricks back to their source. The confrontation came 3 weeks after the first letter. Sarah was grading papers in her classroom after school when the door closed with a soft click. She looked up to find a woman standing there, tall, elegant, with eyes that held the cold determination of someone who had traveled a long way for revenge. "Hello, Meredith," the woman said. "Or do you prefer Sarah now?" Sarah's pen slipped from her fingers. "Who are you?" "Caroline's sister. Michael's sister-in-law." The woman stepped closer. Though I doubt he's mentioned me. I've been abroad for years, came back just in time to discover my brother-in-law is planning to marry the woman who killed my fiancé and let my brother take the fall. The room seemed to tilt beneath Sarah. Tyler was your fiancé? And Jason is my brother. He spent 8 years in prison for what you did. The woman, Caroline's sister, placed her hands flat on Sarah's desk. I've spent the last month watching you play house with Michael and Emma. Does he know he's invited a murderer into his daughter's life? It wasn't murder, Sarah whispered. Tyler was going to kill me. I didn't mean for. Save it, the woman cut her off. I'm not here for explanations. I'm here to give you a choice. Either you tell Michael the truth and turn yourself into the police, or I'll do it for you. You have 1 week. After she left, Sarah sat motionless in her classroom, the afternoon light fading around her. The carefully constructed life she'd built was collapsing, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. For 6 days, Sarah moved through her life like a sleepwalker. She smiled at Emma's stories, discussed wedding plans with Michael, taught her classes with mechanical precision. All the while, the clock ticked down on the ultimatum. On the 7th day, she made her decision. She would tell Michael everything, then turn herself in. She couldn't run again, couldn't bear the thought of disappearing from Emma's life without explanation, leaving another hole where a mother should be. She prepared dinner that night with special care, Michael's favorite lasagna, a salad with the balsamic dressing he loved, fresh bread from the bakery downtown. Emma was spending the night at a friend's house, giving Sarah the privacy she needed for the conversation that would end everything. Michael arrived home late, his clothes dusty from the construction site, his face lighting up at the sight of the candlelit table. What's the occasion? I need to talk to you about something, Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. Something important. They sat across from each other, the food untouched between them as Sarah began her story. She told him everything, about Tyler's abuse, about the night he died, about her flight and the innocent man who had paid for her panic. She told him about the letters, about Caroline's sister and her ultimatum. Michael listened without interruption, his expression unreadable in the candlelight. When Sarah finally fell silent, he pushed back from the table and stood. I need some air, he said, his voice hollow. Sarah remained at the table as he walked out the back door into the yard. Through the window, she could see him pacing, his hands raking through his hair in the gesture she'd come to recognize as profound distress. After what seemed like hours, he returned. I don't know what to say, he admitted, standing in the doorway. Part of me understands why you ran. Another part can't reconcile the woman I love with someone who would let an innocent man go to prison. I was terrified, Sarah whispered. I've regretted it every day since. Michael crossed to the counter where he'd left his phone. I need time to process this. I'm going to call my sister, see if I can stay with her tonight. Michael, please. I'm not saying it's over, he interrupted. I just need space to think. It's a lot, Sarah. As he reached for his phone, the back door burst open. Caroline's sister stood there, her eyes wild, a gun clutched in her trembling hand. Time's up, she said. I heard enough to know you're still making excuses. Michael stepped forward, his hands raised. Elaine? What are you doing here? How do you know Sarah? Her name isn't Sarah, Elaine spat. And she killed the man I was going to marry, then framed my brother. Now she's trying to steal my sister's family too. Put the gun down, Michael said, his voice calm despite the fear evident in his eyes. We can talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. She's a murderer who's been living a lie. She doesn't deserve this life, the life Caroline should have had. Sarah saw the moment Elaine's finger tightened on the trigger. Without thinking, she lunged forward, pushing Michael aside as the gun discharged. Pain exploded in her shoulder, hot and immediate. She fell against the kitchen counter, knocking a knife from the cutting board. What happened next unfolded in terrible slow motion. Michael charged at Elaine, trying to disarm her. They struggled, the gun between them. Sarah, dizzy from pain and blood loss, saw Elaine's finger squeeze the trigger again. The bullet caught Michael in the chest. He staggered backward, his eyes finding Sarah's in a moment of stunned disbelief before he collapsed. Elaine stood frozen, the gun slipping from her fingers. I didn't. I wasn't trying to. Sarah crawled to Michael, pressing her hands against the wound in his chest. Stay with me, she begged. Please, Michael. Emma needs you. I need you. But the light was already fading from his eyes. His hand found hers, squeezing weakly. Take care of our girl, he whispered. Then he was gone. In the terrible silence that followed, Sarah became aware of Elaine backing toward the door. This is your fault, Elaine said, her voice breaking. All of it. Then she was gone, leaving Sarah alone with Michael's body and the knife that had fallen within her reach. In her shock and grief, Sarah had grabbed it, not for protection but simply because her hands needed something to hold besides the growing stillness of the man she loved. And that was how the police found her minutes later, responding to a neighbor's report of gunshots, kneeling beside Michael's body, a knife in her blood-covered hands, looking for all the world like a woman who had just killed the father of the child who would soon be coming home. The truth emerged slowly in the days that followed. Elaine, overcome with remorse, turned herself in the next morning, confessing to Michael's shooting. Ballistics confirmed her story. Security cameras from a neighboring house had captured her fleeing the scene. The investigation into Tyler's death was reopened, with evidence of his history of violence supporting Sarah's claim of self-defense. But none of it brought Michael back. None of it erased the moment when Emma, brought to her aunt's house instead of home that night, learned that her father was gone forever. The funeral was held on a Thursday, the spring day too bright and beautiful for such sorrow. Emma stood beside Sarah, their hands clasped tightly together, as Michael's casket was lowered into the ground beside Caroline's. Are you going to leave too? Emma asked that night, her small voice breaking the silence of the bedroom where Sarah had just finished reading her a story. Sarah gathered the child close. No, sweetheart. I'm staying right here with you, as long as you want me. Forever, Emma said firmly. I want you to stay forever. The years that followed were not easy. Sarah served 6 months in prison for her role in concealing Tyler's death, though the charges were reduced in light of the circumstances and her cooperation. Emma stayed with Michael's sister during that time, with Sarah allowed regular visits. The little girl's resilience was both heartbreaking and inspiring. She had already learned too young how to navigate grief. When Sarah was released, they moved to a new house, one without the memories of that terrible night. Sarah returned to teaching, and slowly, they built a new normal. They spoke of Michael often, keeping his memory alive in stories and photographs. On Father's Day, they visited his grave with flowers and drawings from Emma. 5 years after Michael's death, Sarah sat on the porch swing of their home, watching Emma, now 12, practicing soccer moves in the yard. The girl had her father's determination, his easy laugh, his way of seeing the best in people despite everything. Mom! Emma called, waving for Sarah to watch a particularly complicated maneuver. The word still caught in Sarah's heart sometimes, the precious gift of being claimed by this child who had every reason to reject her. As the sun set behind the trees, casting long shadows across their small yard, Sarah thought about the twisting path that had led her here. The mistakes she'd made, the lies she'd told, the truth that had ultimately cost Michael his life. She would carry that burden always. But she would also carry the lesson Michael had taught her in their brief time together, that love was worth the risk, even knowing it could end in heartbreak. That family wasn't always what you were born into, but what you built together, day by day, choice by choice. Emma abandoned her soccer ball and bounded up the steps to collapse beside Sarah on the swing. I'm starving, she announced, leaning her head against Sarah's shoulder. Sarah.